Hey everybody, welcome back to yet another lesson in sculpting the face. This is going to be lesson number 12, sculpting the eyes. This lesson we're going to cover pages 70 through 80 in the textbook. All right, so a couple things to mention really quick. First off, the book, I'm not crazy about the way that the author directs you how to sculpt certain parts of the eye. So I am going to do an overview of the reading, but during the actual sculpting part, I am going to do things a lot different than how the author does it for, in particular, the eyelids. Um, so anyhow, keep that in mind. The other thing is that this can be a very challenging lesson because we are sculpting very small details to sculpt the eyes. So even though I've done this dozens and dozens of times, I do this differently almost every single time I do it because the underlying wireframe turns out very different each time you sculpt it. So I mention that because you may not, you may try to do some of the things that I show you and find that you're just not getting good results. In that case, try using a different sculpting tool, or try using a different size or strength than you see that I was using with the brush, or try maybe doing a different type of brush stroke. Um, at the end of the day, what's really important is that the shape is there, that the overall form is correct. So just as I don't do it the way that he does it here in the book, you may find that you have to do it slightly different than the way that I show you as well. All right. So let's go over some of the different anatomy. We don't have to go over all of these. First thing to mention is that the eye sits in the socket and it is surrounded by fat and muscle. So let's see what it's talking about. So up to this point, we just have an empty eye socket. And if you were sculpting in clay, what you would typically do is just roll up a little tiny clay ball for the eyeball, stick it inside the socket, and then build up the fat and the muscle around where the eye is to fill it in. Now with us, we're going to kind of take the same approach. We're going to use the foamy tool, and we're going to build up the eyeball using the foamy tool. And this isn't going to be my final one, but you're just going to sort of build up, and that's not looking great, but you're going to build that up, and then you're going to fill in around it using either the fill or the wax tool. All right, let me go ahead and turn on the finished version. Okay. Um, the eyes are not on a flat plane. They are rounded. This is similar to the, is it turning that layer on? Oh, let me, okay, so I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here, but that's another thing worth mentioning is that the book says to work at level 4, but notice here I have it at level 5, and the reason for that is that it's so hard to get these eyelids to look good without getting little distortions in them when you're at level 4. So I recommend going to level 5 when you sculpt, and you can see that for the small wrinkle that is sculpted into it. Let me go ahead and turn that on. I went all the way up to level 6 because of the same reason. And we might see that today as I'm working that you get little jagged lines. And if you do, there's no way to fix those jagged lines. You just have to subdivide higher and get more polygons. So there you can see there's the wrinkle that I added. And again, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. But even here with it at subdivision level 6, you can see the little bumps. And if I turn on the wireframe, you can see why that is. So my wireframe is just distorted, and it's kind of hard to know if it's doing that or not because you don't sculpt it with the wireframe turned on. So if you do get that, there's really just not a whole lot you can do about it. So, but keep in mind that you're not going to be this close to the model if you're in a video game and the camera's going to be set further back, and so you can see that the little bumps aren't as noticeable from a distance. So anyways, getting ahead of myself. So we'll see later in the book he says you should stay at 4, but you're going to have to subdivide up as much as you need to get rid of those artifacts when you're sculpting. Okay, going back to what my original point was, it said the eyes are not on a flat plane. So that just means that if we look from the bottom up, you can see that the eyes are rounded and match the contour of the skull. It's the same idea as with the mouth. The mouth is rounded. All right, the eyelids are draped over the eyeball and are rounded to follow the contour of the eye. So we saw that there, the eyelids Look from the top, you can see the eyelid is rounded, follows the contour of the eye. And this is kind of interesting. He says, when viewed from the front, the outer corner of the eye is higher than the inner corner. That's true, but not by much. You don't want to exaggerate that. So if we look here at the picture of the eye, I'm going to go ahead and just drag out a little line, you guys can see. You can see that it is a little bit higher. It's just by a very small amount. So you don't really need to, don't exaggerate that. Don't lift the outside corner up too high, or the eye starts to look like the person's like making a weird expression. So you just want to barely keep it above. It's barely noticeable. Okay. Not a lot of anatomy that we need to know. All the anatomy of the inner eye, like the pupil and the iris, we're not sculpting that into the model, so you don't really need to worry about that. There's a little red meaty bump that you have in the corner of your eye called your caruncle. And then other than that, there's just the upper and lower eyelid. That's it. And then for things that are like incredibly detailed, like eyelashes, we wouldn't be able to sculpt that into the mesh. It's too small. All right. So let's see, go to here. The inner corner of the eye should not be visible from the side view. So if we rotate from the side, we can see that the eye comes more further forward than the inside corner of the eye. Let's see. And then I think that's it. So the reason that I'm skipping over this stuff here is because these are all things that if you were working without concept art, you would have to keep in mind. But because you're working with concept art in the background, you don't need to worry about making the eyes too far apart because you just make them match the concept art. All right, so those are the main things to consider when you're sculpting an eye. Here's where I mentioned that he says that you can stay at subdivision level 4 with no problems. Well, that's never been my experience in trying to work with sculpting the eye. All right, so let's go ahead and move over to Mudbox, and I am going to turn these layers off. Okay. Make sure that when you're sculpting that you add a new layer for yourself. Looks like that got locked on 3, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that layer. That's where I was going to put the eyeball for today. All right, so let's make a new layer, call it eye. I'm going to call mine I2 because I already have another layer down there with an eye in it. And again, we're at level 5 for this sculpt. Okay, let's go ahead and do a quick rundown of the book here. All right, so sculpting the eyeball. So he mentions using the foamy tool. You may need to use the bulge tool. One works better than the other almost every single time that I do this. So just like I said, experiment and see what works best for you. The other thing is that he recommends drawing in using the concept art, drawing in these little eyes. But I would not do that because when you bulge, it causes it to form a really bad wrinkle. So don't do that. You don't need it. You're just going to put the eyeball straight in there. Okay, next you're going to sculpt the lower eyelid. And the way that he describes this is really involved. But it's actually very simple if you do it the way that I show you. The way that I recommend doing it is what he does here, freezing the top of the eye, and then forming these ridges on the bottom. But I do this using the bulge tool. What he recommends is using the grab tool and then pulling out and up. But like I mentioned, I find that I just get better results when I use the bulge tool first to do this, and then pull the eyelid up using the grab tool after I do that. He also goes on this really elaborate description here of using the flatten tool from the top, from looking down. But again, the way I'm going to show you how to do it is I think much more straightforward and gives you just as good results. Okay. The upper eyelid. So again, you're going to see me do it quite differently than the way he does it in the book. So he's freezing a ton of stuff here. The way that I do the upper eyelid is exactly the same way that you do the lower eyelid. So you're just going to freeze the bottom half and then use the bulge tool to create the upper eyelid, and then pull it out and then fill in around it. Okay, here it's kind of hard to notice, but there's an absence of this bump right here. So that's all he's trying to show you in this picture, is that you add this sort of triangular shaped bulge that's a bulge of fat. And then this can be the tricky part. So your eye, your upper eyelid actually folds under itself when your eye is open. So if you don't believe me, go ahead and get out your cell phone, take a look at, and then keep your head straight forward, and then take a look at your eye or upper eyelid real quick, and you'll notice that wrinkle where your upper eyelid goes under this flap of skin. So the way that he's doing it here is he's freezing everything but this, and he's already used the grab tool to push that back in this picture. And then here he's just unfreezed it, right? So what I'm going to show you is that it's actually easier just to use the bulge tool inverted and then drag over the top of that and create that little line. It's more straightforward. Okay. Here he's pushing the inner corner of the eyelid in. He's making sure that the eye is rounded. Let's see. And then last but not least, he's adding that little bump, the caruncle, into the corner of the eye. And he has all this freezing around here. You just need to go in with the sculpt tool, create a little bump and smooth it out, and then you're done. Okay. Now, and then I'm going to skip this part right here. You don't need to create the pupils for the eye, because we wouldn't do that in a video game. We would just paint that into the texture map. All right, and that is pretty much it for the overview of the book. Okay, so let's go ahead and start by creating the actual eyeball. And I'm going to go ahead and try using the foamy tool, and I'm using a strength of about 6 and a size of about 12. So we'll see here. Now the important thing is when I do this, you're going to just build it up in slow, gradual circles like so. It's important not to scribble. And it's going to look kind of funny when you first add it. And that's actually looking pretty good. Now when you do it, the main thing is you just don't want it to be too, bulged. And the other thing is you don't want to obviously scribble. So again, you saw me just go build that up in slow circles using the foamy tool. If yours doesn't look so great, just use the bulge tool instead. Now that's actually a little bit too flat, so I'm going to go ahead and hit it with the bulge tool just to give it a little bit more of a raised center. Turn off invert. Okay, and then let's see, just try to build up that middle part just a little bit so it's a little rounder. Check what my current strength is on that. Oh, it's 1. Wow, it's really tiny. Okay. There we go. So you want to just rotate from the front, from the side, so you got it round enough. All right, that's looking pretty good. All right, this is a really, really, really important step for this sculpt. The reason that it's so important is because once you get this round shape for the eyeball, like you see here, you're never going to want to go in here and touch it with any kind of sculpting tool other than maybe the smooth tool, because that's the quickest way to make your eye sculpt look unnatural, is that the eye isn't perfectly round and smooth. It has bumps in it or something like that. So getting this part right makes the whole rest of the sculpt easier. All right, next we're going to go ahead and we're going to do the eyelid. So I'm going to go ahead and freeze the whole top. That's a pretty small freeze. Starting to lose my grip on my stylus here. Okay. That looks pretty good. Let me clean up this corner a little bit. Okay, and then let me make this. Okay, there we go. Next, I'm going to use the bulge tool, and we're going to give this a few test runs here. And I'm going to use steady stroke. And I probably need a bigger strength than that. I just want to go ahead and give us a few test runs to see. Okay, that's pretty good. All right, so using steady stroke, you're going to do this one stroke at a time. It's really important not to scribble when you do this because it'll look funny. So I'm just going to build up, take your time. Go right around from one corner of the eye to the next. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and build that up a little bit more. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and use the grab tool and pull it out and up. And my computer is a little bit laggy, unfortunately, right now. Probably because I'm recording and I'm at such a high subdivision level. So that's actually looking pretty good. All right. Okay, good. All right, next we are going to fill in. Boy, my computer is totally locking up right now. No. Okay, little technical difficulty there. So my computer, my computer, I think is doing something in the background. So I apologize in advance if it's real jittery or anything like that. I think my computer is doing like file backups or something like that. Okay, anyways, coming back to this. All right, so next I'm going to go ahead and use the pinch tool and just kind of, my computer's really laggy right now. And I'm just going to go in here and tighten up between the eyeball and the eyelid. Okay, there we go. All right, looking pretty good so far. Now this kid's got some massive bags under her eyes. She's been up all night playing Fortnite. So we need to fix that up. So we're going to fill in here using the fill tool and then maybe come back in with the wax tool as well. And what I would recommend is just doing what I'm doing right now. Don't scribble. Just go back and forth like a rocking chair, filling in that gap. Okay. And then for this part, we're probably going to have to use something like the wax tool. Let's try fill and see what we get. It's actually not too bad. Okay, now it's not wanting to do this last part, so we'll do the wax tool. I might be able to just smooth that too to get rid of it, but let's go ahead and do the wax tool here once, just to get rid of that little bump. Okay, next I'm going to go ahead and just smooth out and work this all into the rest of the mesh. My computer, I know I keep saying it, but there's a lag between when I move my stylus and when the way it updates on the screen. Okay, so I'm just smoothing right now. Okay. Now also notice the strength on my smooth tool, 100. I said this in previous lessons. When you start to increase the when you start to increase the number of subdivisions, you start to need to set the strength of the smooth tool higher. The other thing is that if you notice that you're trying to smooth and it's not working, you can always just go to a lower subdivision level, like 4, and then create a new layer called smooth, and then the smooth tool will have more of an effect. Okay, so I could do more here, probably more smoothing on it. It's looking pretty sharp. And if you can't smooth it out, you may have to go over it with like the wax tool. Because again, it kind of looks like she has bags under her eyes. Where's wax tool? In fact, I may have to do that. I may have to go in and create a new layer and do that right now. I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording so I can do that real quick. I'm just going to create a new layer. Well, I guess I could show you guys. All right, so I'm going to go down to subdivision level 4, create a new layer. This is for smoothing. Okay, and then just go ahead and smooth this out. There we go. This is where having a stylus comes in handy. There we go, kiddo. No more bags under your eyes. Okay, so let's step back up to 5 and then move back to this layer. Okay. All right, I'm happy with that. All right, so let's go ahead and go back to the freeze tool and do the upper eyelid. And again, the book goes through this gnarly process. I'm going to do the exact same thing I just did a moment ago. And now I'm starting to run out of real estate above the eye. You need to have this a significant gap up here to fill in and still have her have a brow. So I'm going to go ahead and let's see, what do I want to do here? I can either make the eye smaller. In fact, I'll do that a little bit. No, I don't like that. Okay, and then what I'll do is at the end, if her eyes look too narrow, I'm just going to use the grab tool and widen everything up. So don't be too concerned about getting it right the very first time. All right, let's do the same trick with the bulge tool that we did earlier to create the eyelid. Looks a little wobbly, but I can live with it. Okay, there we go. Oh, she looks angry. Sorry, kid. All right, so let's go ahead and fix that with the grab tool. Oh, too much. Boy, this lag is driving me crazy. I drag and then it doesn't respond right away. Okay, that's good enough. Okay, I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna use the grab tool and pull the eyelid out to give it some more thickness. Yikes. Boy, this is really tough to do right now with my computer acting up like this because there's a delay between I'll click and then drag and it won't do anything and then it will just pop to that spot. So it's hard for me to judge if I'm getting it right or not. All right. So that's good enough. All right, let's go ahead and do the same thing. We're going to use the pinch tool. Okay, it's not unfreezing. Okay, so pinch tool. Oops, that's way too big for the brush size. Okay, and her eye is looking a little narrow, but like I said, you can come back at the end and fix that up. Okay, next we're going to create the triangular shaped bump up here. Before I do that, I'm going to flatten this out a little bit. Okay, so we're going to do that using the, let's use the wax tool. Let's use the fill tool first to fill in this area. Okay, and then use the wax tool to finish it off. Oh, let's turn off steady stroke. Okay, so just giving that little bump. And then let's go ahead and smooth it. Hopefully smooth plays nice with me. I don't have to go to my smooth layer, but if you do, you do. Okay, and I'm going to fill in up here. Don't do too much because you do have. Okay, not too bad. Okay, I could do a lot more work on this, but the video is already getting long, so I'm going to go ahead and just accept the current level of detail on it, but you could go in here and I could do more smoothing and whatnot. All right, next I'm gonna go ahead and pinch a little bit on here, tighten that up a little bit more. Don't go too crazy on it though, because that's actually a little bit too much. So let's go ahead and smooth it. There we go. All right, anyways. All right, so there you go. So that's how you create the upper and lower eyelid. Okay, we're almost done. So the last thing we need to do is create that little wrinkle. Like I said, I just use the bulge tool, set to a really, really, really small setting. Okay, let's test it out. Okay, that's good. Make sure that this is inverted. It's not. And we're just going to draw that wrinkle right along here. Microphone cord is getting stuck. This is not going well for me. My microphone cable just got stuck in my shirt while I sat up. Okay. And you could actually turned out pretty good. Mine didn't get really bumpy on me this time. And then last but not least, you could use the grab tool and freeze this everything down here. That's too small. Freeze everything down here very carefully. Okay, let's make sure that I got enough in here. Okay. Looks like I got a little bit too much up here. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of any blue up there. All right, let's see how this works. Let's see if this works out for us or not. So the grab tool, and then we're going to, the grab tool, and then we'll set that to a really big thing. I'll just pull that out a little tiny bit to exaggerate that wrinkle. Oh, super lag. I'm going to just accept that. My computer's way too laggy. All right, and then the last thing that we're going to do, come on, unfreeze. It's not unfreezing. I'll pause it while it's not doing it. Okay, is it recording? Yeah, it's recording. Okay, so yeah, I would, okay, and then when I pulled it, it created a little line right there that I need to smooth out. Yikes, that's pretty bumpy in there. Needs a lot more smoothing. But again, the video is pretty long, so I'll just mention that this needs to be smoothed more and worked more into it. But those, oh, and then of course the caruncle. Let's not forget the caruncle. So we're gonna go to the sculpt tool, make it really small, and build up a little bump right there. That's it. There you go, caruncle. Caruncle. Who's your uncle? The caruncle. All right. Anyways, there you go. So that's the major steps for sculpting the eye. So hopefully that simplifies doing this for you guys versus the steps in the book, which are pretty, like I said, they're pretty arduous. I could probably push that in more, but again, the video is already a half hour at this point, so I will just turn this layer off and go to the one that I like. It's like a baking show. Just pull the turkey out of the oven. See, look, everybody, it's delicious. So there we go. So this is the one I did earlier today. So you can see that it's not nearly as bumpy up here as what I had at the end of mine. So just make sure you smooth it out better than I did in the demo. All right, you guys, so that is lesson number 12, how to sculpt the eye. As usual, if you guys need any help on anything, don't hesitate to send me an email and I will help you out. All right, good luck on this, you guys.